true stories. We're up to the third story now of the Snow Queen. The Flower Garden of the Woman Who Could Conjure. Magic. I'm assuming. Unless conjure means something different. Okay. Okay. So we left off with Kay being kidnapped. But how fared little Gerda during Kay's absence? What had become of him no one knew, or could anyone give the slightest information, except the boys who had said... excepting the boys who said that he had tied his sled to another very large one, which had driven through the street and out the town gate. Nobody knew where it went. Many tears were shed for him, and little Gerda wept bitterly for a long time. She said she knew he must be dead, that he was drowned in the river by which the... She said she knew he must be dead, that he was drowned in the river which flowed close to by the school. Oh, indeed, those long winter days were very dreary. But last spring came with warm sunshine. Kay is dead and gone, said little Gerda. I don't believe it, said the sunshine. He is dead and gone, she said to the sparrows. We don't believe it, they replied. And at last little Gerda began to doubt herself. I will put on my new red shoes, she said one morning, those that Kay had never seen, and then I will go down to the river and ask for him. It was quite early when she kissed her old grandmother, who was still asleep. Then she put on her red shoes and went, quite alone, out of the town gates towards the river. Is it true you have taken my little playmate away from me? She said to the river. I will give you my red shoes if you will give him back to me. And it seemed as if the waves nodded to her in a strange manner. Then she took off her red shoes, which she liked better than anything else, and threw them both into the river. But they fell near the bank, and the little waves carried them back to the land, just as if the river would not take from her what she loved best, because they not give her back little Kai. But she thought the shoes had not been thrown out far enough. Then she crept onto a boat which lay among the reeds, and she threw the shoes again from the further end of the boat into the water. But it was not fastened, for her movement sent it gliding away from the land. When she saw this, she hastened to reach the end of the boat, but before she could do so, it was more than a yard from the bank and drifting away faster than ever. Then little Gerda was very much frightened and began to cry, but no one heard her except the sparrows, and they could not carry her to land. But they flew along by the shore and sang as if to comfort her. Here we are, here we are. The boat floated with a little stream, and little Gerda sat quite still with only her stockings on her feet. The red shoes floated after her, but she could not reach them, because the boat kept so much in advance. The banks on each side of the river were so very pretty. There were beautiful flowers, old trees, sloping fields, in which cows and sheep were grazing, but not a man to be seen. Perhaps the river will carry me to little Kai, thought Gerda, and then she became more cheerful, and raised her head and looked at the beautiful green banks. And so the boat sailed on for hours. At length she came to a large cherry orchard, in which stood a small stop, and the dog falls. Then he barked. Oh, hang on. Let's get to old age. I was wondering why that looked funny. In which stood a small red house with strange red and blue windows. It also had a thatched roof, and outside were two wooden soldiers that presented arms to her as she sailed past. Gerda called out to them, for she thought they were alive, but of course they did not answer. And as the boat drifted nearer to the shore, she saw what they really were. Then Gerda called still louder, and there came a very old woman out of the house leaning on a crutch. She wore a large hat to shade her from the sun, and on it were painted all sorts of pretty flowers. "You poor little child," said the old woman. "How did you manage to come all this distance into the wide world on such a rapid rolling stream?" "On the boat, obviously." "Duh." And then the old woman walked into the water, seized the boat with her crutch, and drew it onto land, and lifted Gerda out. And Gerda was glad to feel herself on dry land, although she was rather afraid of the strange old woman. "Come and tell me who you are," she said, "and how you came here." Then Gerda told her everything. While the old lady shook her head and said, "Hem, hem." And when she finished, Gerda asked if she had not seen little Kay, and the woman told her that he had not passed by that way, but it was very likely he would come. So she told Gerda not to be sorrowful, but to taste the cherries and look at the flowers. They were better than any picture book, for each of them could tell a story. She then took Gerda by the hand and led her into the little house, and the old woman closed the door. This reminds me of a different story. The windows were very high, and as the panes were red, blue, and yellow, the daylight shone through them in all sorts of singular colours. On the table stood beautiful cherries, and Gerda had permission to eat as many as she would. While she was eating them, the old woman combed out her long flaxen ringlets with a golden comb, and the glossy curls hung down on each side of a little round pleasant face, which looked fresh and blooming as a rose. I have long been wishing for a dear little maiden like you," said the old woman. "And now you must stay with me and see how happily we shall live together." Suspicious. And while she went on combing little Gerda's hair, she thought less and less about adopted brother Kai, for the old woman could conjure, although she was not a wicked witch. No, she kind of sounds like one. She conjured only a little for her own amusement, and now because she wanted to keep Gerda. Yeah, it's kind of the definition. Therefore she went in the garden and stretched out her crutch towards all the rose trees, beautiful as they were, and immediately sunk them into the dark earth, so no one could tell where they once stood. The old woman was afraid that if little Gerda saw roses, she would think of those at home, and then remember little Kai and run away. Then she took Gerda into the flower garden. How fragrant and beautiful it was! Every flower that could be thought of for every season of the year was here in full bloom. No picture book could have more beautiful colours. Gerda jumped for joy and played until the sun went down behind the tall cherry trees. Then she slept in an elegant bed with red silk pillows, embroidered with bright-coloured violets, and then she dreamed as pleasantly as the queen on her wedding day. The next day, for many days yet, although there were so many of them, it seemed as if one was missing, and which it was she could not tell. One day, however, as she sat looking at the old woman's hat with the painted flowers on it, she saw that the prettiest of them all was a rose. The old woman had forgotten to take it from her hat when she made all those roses sink into the earth. But it is very difficult to keep the thoughts together in everything. One little mistake upsets all of our arrangements. "What? Are there no roses here?" cried Gerda, as she ran into the garden and examined all the beds, and searched and searched. There was not one to be found. Then she sat down and wept, and her tears fell just on the place where one of the rose trees had sunk down. The warm tears moistened the earth, and the rose tree sprouted up at once, as blooming as when it had sunk. And Gerda embraced it and kissed the roses, and thought of the beautiful roses at home, and with them of little Kai. "Oh, how I've been detained," said the little maiden. "I wanted to seek for little Kai. Do you know where he is?" she asked the roses. "Do you think he is dead?" And the roses answered, "No, he is not dead. We've been in the ground where all the dead lie, but Kai is not there." "Thank you," said little Gerda. And then she went to the other flowers and looked into their little cups and asked, "Do you know where little Kai is?" But each flower, as stood in the sunshine, dreamed only of its own little fairy tale of history. Not one knew anything of Kai. Gerda heard many stories from the flowers as she asked them one after another about him. "And what?" said the tiger lily. "Hark! Do you hear the drum? Turn, turn! There are only two notes always. Turn, turn! Listen to the women's song of mourning. Hear the cries of the priest. In a long red robe stands the Hindu widow by the funeral pile. The flames rise around her as she places herself on the dead body of her husband, but the Hindu woman is thinking of the living one in that circle, of him, her son, who lighted in those flames. Those shining eyes troubled her heart more painfully than the flames which would consume her body to ashes. Can the fire of the heart be extinguished in the flames of the funeral pile?" "I don't understand that at all," said little Gerda. "That's my story," said the tiger lily. "What says the convolvulus? Near yonder narrow road stands an old knight's castle. Thick ivy creeps over the old ruined walls, leaf over leaf, even to the balcony, which stands a beautiful maiden. She bends over the balustrades and looks up the road. No rose on its stem is fresher than she, no autumn blossom wafted by the wind floats more lightly than she moves. Her rich silk rustles as she bends over and examines. Will he not come?" "Is it Kai you mean?" asked Gerda. "I am only speaking of the story of my dream," replied the flower. "What?" said the little snowdrop. "Between two trees a rope is hanging. There is a piece of board upon it. It is a swing. Two pretty little girls in dresses white as snow and with long green ribbons fluttering from their hats are sitting upon it swinging. Their brother, who is taller than they are, stands in the swing, and he has one arm around the rope to steady himself, and in one hand he holds a little bowl, and in the other a clay pipe. He is blowing bubbles. As the swing goes on, the bubbles fly up higher. The bubbles fly upwards, reflecting the most beautiful varying colours. The last still hangs from the bowl of the pipe and sways in the wind. On goes the swing, and then a little black dog comes running up. He is almost as light as the bubble, and he raises himself on his hind legs and wants to be taken into the swing, but does not stop. The dog falls, and then he barks and gets angry. The children stoop towards him, and the bubble bursts. A swinging plank, a light, sparkling foam pitcher. That is my story." "It may be all very pretty what you are telling me," said little Gerda, "but you speak so mournfully, and you say that you do not mention little Kai at all." "What do the high thinkers say? There were three beautiful sisters, fair and delicate. The dress of one was red, the second blue, and the third pure white. Hand in hand they danced in the moonlight by the calm lake, but they were human beings, not fairy elves. The sweet fragrance attracted them, and they disappeared into the woods. Here the fragrance becomes stronger. Three coffins, in which lay the three beautiful maidens, glided from the thickest part of the forest across the lake. The fireflies flew lightly over them, like little floating torches. Do the dancing maidens sleep, or are they dead? The scent of the flower says they are corpses. The evening bell tolls their knell. Kell. "You make me quite sorrowful," said little Gerda. "Your perfume is so strong you make me think of the dead maidens. Ah, is little Kai really dead then? The roses have been in the earth, so they say no." Cling, clang, tolled the Hythican bells. "We are not tolling for little Kai. We do not know him. We sing our song, the only one we know." Then Gerda went to the buttercups that were glistening among the bright green leaves. You are little bright sun," said Gerda. "Tell me if you know where I can find my playfellow." And the buttercup sparkled gaily and looked up at Gerda. What song could the buttercup sing? It was not about Kai. The bright warm sun shone on the little court on the first day of spring. His bright beam rested on the white walls of the neighbouring house, and close by bloomed the first yellow flower of the season, glittering like gold in the sun's warm ray. And an old woman sat in her armchair at the house door, and with her granddaughter, a poor and pretty servant maid, came to see her for a short visit. When she kissed her grandmother, there was gold everywhere, the gold in the heart of that holy kiss. There was a golden morning, there was gold in the beaming sunlight, gold in the leaves of the lowly flower, and on the lips of the maiden. There, that is my story, said the buttercup. Itchy. My poor old grandmother, sighed Gerda. She is longing to see me and grieving for me as she did little Kai, but I shall go home soon now, and take little Kai with me. It is no use asking the flowers, they only know their own songs and can give me no information. And then she tucked up her little dress that she might run faster. By the Narcissus caught her by the leg as she was jumping over it. So she stopped and looked at the tall yellow flower and said, Perhaps you may know something. Then she stooped up quite close down to the Then she stooped down quite close to the flower and listened. And what did he say? I can see myself, said the Narcissus. And how sweet is my perfume. Up in a little room with a bowl window stands a little dancing girl half undressed. She sometimes stands on one leg and sometimes on both, and looks as if she would tread the whole world under her feet. She is nothing but a delusion. She is pouring water out of a teapot on a piece of stuff which she holds in her hands. It is her bodice. Cleanliness is a good thing, she says. Her white dress hangs on a peg. It has been washed in the teapot and dried on the roof, and she puts it on and ties a suffering-coloured handkerchief round her neck, which makes the dress look whiter. See how she stretches out her legs as if she was showing off her stem. I can see myself, I can see myself. What do I care about for all that, said Gerda. You need not tell me such stuff. And then she ran to the other end of the garden. The door was fastened, but she pressed against the rusty latch, and it gave way. The door sprang open, and little Gerda ran out with bare feet into the wide world. She looked back 3 times, but no one seemed to be following her. At last she could run no longer. So she sat down to rest on a great stone, and when she looked around she saw that summer was over and autumn was very far advanced. She had known nothing of this in the beautiful garden, where the sun shone and the flowers grew all year round. Oh, how long have I wasted my time, said little Gerda. It is autumn. I must not rest any longer. And she rose up to go on. But her little feet were wounded and sore, and everything around her looked so cold and bleak. The long willow trees were quite yellow, and the dewdrops fell like water. Leaf after leaf dropped from the trees. The sloe thorn alone still bore fruit, but the sloes were sour and set the teeth on edge. Oh, how dark and weary the whole world appeared.